Howdy, Legendary Void here, and today we have our, I believe, 6th Wave X discussion video, and this week we have a ton to go over, so I'm just going to make a few small comments before we begin. First thing, don't forget to check out the description below to see how you can join the Transformers CCG custom cards page, so you can vote on which character you would like to be revealed next, which we will be talking about at the end of the video. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the character that was voted for on the last week's poll, which it was a very, very close poll. It was between Rack and Ruin and Hardhead, I believe so. But Rack and Ruin barely managed to pull out. And yeah, let's go and talk about him. So I actually have him, since Rack and Ruin technically doesn't have an alt mode, he actually is going to have two bot modes, being bot 1 and bot 2 mode. And his bot 1 mode, which is the mode that he'll start in, he's a 6/15/1 at 12 stars. He's a Wrecker melee, so he's a, he does Wrecker stuff. And the effect on the card changes depending on how many times you flip the character this turn. So if you don't flip him at all, he just has the built-in bold 1. If you flip him once, he gets bold 2, twice bold 3, and 3 or more times he gets bold 4, which if you flip him 3 or more times, that's pretty impressive. But 3 or more times gives him that pretty cool bold 4. But it's pretty hard to do that without showing off. You'd have to brainstorm and then I guess rapid conversion twice if you wanted to do it a different way. But he's definitely leaning more towards a orange build instead of a blue, because he obviously has that bold built in, and he's going to want to be paired up with Wreckers because of his bot 2 mode ability, where he's a 6/15/2, so he just gets a defense, and that's the only thing that changes. He's still a Wrecker melee. And then he gets to, when he flips to this mode, do damage to an enemy equal to the number of Wreckers you began the game with, which, with the 25-star limit, it is only possible to run, at most, 2 Wreckers at once. So, with Rack and Ruin, he's going to be pinging 2 damage anytime he flips the bot 2 mode. I originally experimented with, whenever he flips this mode, do damage for each other Wrecker, so it'd only be ping 1. And that was not strong enough for a 2-wide list. So we're going to try him pinging 2 damage, and that seems to be working so far. It's a strong ability now, being able to just, deal 2 every time he flips, considering that he is a flippable character, and he's going to try and flip as much as he can. But pinging 2 damage, it makes him a lot more viable than he was before. It doesn't make him entirely strong. Like, I can beat him, don't get me wrong, especially with 2-wide, because that seems to be where he is strongest. But he's not unbeatable, but it does make him a pretty tough cookie to crack, especially now that Hollow Matter Projector seems to be getting somewhere up there in competitive playability. So next up on the list is actually a massive series of characters, which I got to reveal with some of my friends over at transformergame.net, which that'll be in the description below, as well as the video where we played all of these different characters and stratagems on in their multiplayer format of Primus. And that was a lot of fun, even if I didn't win. It was still pretty fun. But we're going to first talk about this firing range stratagem for Dark Mount. Now, I know a few people have already been working on a stratagem for Dark Mount, but I thought I'd throw my 2 cents into the pool and show you all what I got. So it gives him +3 health, because obviously his biggest misstep is that he has such low health. 9 health is not a lot for a 9-star character. And then when one of your tanks becomes tapped, you get to do 1 damage to an enemy character in bot or body mode, which this effect can actually be attributed to one of my friends here in San Antonio, who was talking about how tanks should have like a built-in effect to where anytime they become tapped, you should be able to do a damage. And I was like, no, that's too strong, but how about we throw it into a stratagem? And he thought that was a pretty good idea. So this is, what became of that. And I've seen a lot of people saying this is probably a really balanced card, and I really appreciate you all saying that, because I think this is probably one of my favorite stratagems that I got to make. But yeah, moving on, next character is the Megatron that I have for, in his subtitles, Tyrannical General. He's the leader tank ranged in his alt mode. He's a 5/16/3 for 12 stars, which that's pretty big. But it's Megatron we're talking about here, so we're going to give him pretty big stats anyway. And before the game begins, you get to reveal an Energon Mace from your deck and put it into your hand. So it basically gives you a free weapon that can do 2 or 3 damage, and sometimes pierce 3 if you're attacking an Autobot leader. So it's a pretty neat effect. I wouldn't say it's incredibly strong, but it's definitely really nice. And then his bot mode side, which he's a 4/16/2, and you might be saying, oh, why is that lower than his alt mode? He should be more powerful in his bot mode. And to that I say, yes, he is. Because for each Decepticon you started the game with, that does include Megatron himself, he gets +1 attack. meaning that if you're running 3 wide, he has base 7. If you're running 4 wide with him, which that's pretty hard to do without running a patrol team, he's going to be a 8, 16, 2, which that's pretty damn powerful. And he's leader melee, so this is, I think, the first instance of a Megatron being a melee character, mainly because he has the mace in the picture, and I did stuff with the Energon mace, so it's pretty interesting card there. Next up is the SUNSTREAKER, Ruthless Sociopath, which he's a 412-2 in his bot mode, and he's a specialist. He has Brave built in, and whenever he has 7 or more damage counters on him, he has +1 attack and +1 defense. So, you know, he's going to be able to take a lot of damage, obviously, from being a Brave character, and then whenever he's above half, he gets a big boost to his stats. So, not big, but it's a relatively large boost to him. And then his alt mode, he's a car specialist, 412-2, same stats, doesn't change at all. And he has the Brave built in on this side as well, but anytime he takes attack damage, you get to repair 1 damage from him. This is obviously strictly attack damage, not something like a Bolt of Lightning or a Plasma Burst. And he is 8 stars, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned that. So he fits pretty well into a lot of card decks. And, you know, obviously he's a car, so he's immediately playable. But he does some interesting stuff. Obviously, trying to play Toolbox on him lets him repair 2 anytime he takes damage. So if your opponent's trying to attack and ping little bits of damage with their small characters, they're basically going to be doing effectively nothing. Next up is a Bumblebee Mercenary, which I don't know how people feel about this one. I'm actually really proud of this one. It's actually kind of based off of the Netflix show that was recently put out. Because he wasn't an Autobot or a Decepticon, he was kind of just a mercenary to find Energon. But yeah, he's a 412-0 in his alt mode. But he gets +1 defense for each different faction you begin the game with. So if you have all 3, he becomes a 412-3, and he is car melee. So again, he is automatically playable. And the Bumblebee in his bot mode is still a melee, and I obviously had to take out his Autobot symbol because the artwork for him did have it on both of his sides. So I had to do some fancy Photoshop work on it, and I think it looks pretty good. But he's a 312-2, so his attack goes down by 1, and his defense goes up by 2. And he has a bounty effect that says whenever he KOs an enemy, you get to put in Energon cubes from your scrap pile to your hand. Now this is actually going to be one of the first battle cards that I reveal for my Wave X set. Now Energon cubes is a orange-blue utility, and once during your turn, you may scrap a card from your hand to move it to another one of your characters. And when it's attached to a character, it gains an effect based on its faction. So obviously it kind of leans towards Bumblebee's alt mode ability in that you want to play multiple factions. But if you attach it to an Autobot, you get to repair 2 from it. If you attach it to a Decepticon, it gets +2 attack until the end of the turn. And then a Mercenary lets you do 2 damage to an enemy Autobot or Decepticon. So it has a lot of versatility. And as my friends in the video pointed out, it's very, very strong. And I think being able to scrap a card for it kind of makes balances out a little bit, but I think making it a star and at the very least effectively making Bumblebee a 9-cost character to play the Energon cubes makes it a little bit more balanced than otherwise it would be. Next up is Alita 1 Fearless Warrior, which Alita 1 is a motorcycle specialist in alt mode. She's a 413-2 for 9 stars, so pretty decent stats, I'd say. And then for each motorcycle on your starting team, she has Tough 1. So if you're playing 2 other motorcycles, then she has Tough 2 built in. So, but if you flip to her bot mode side, she's Pure Specialist, and she's a 513-1, and she has Bold 1 for each other motorcycle on your starting team. Meaning that if you have 2 other motorcycles, she's going to have Bold 2. So this kind of makes her versatile in any sort of motorcycle deck. So she's kind of going to either be your big hitter, or she's going to be a defensive wall against your opponent in motorcycle decks, depending on what kind of color you want to run. But she's pretty strong. She does some interesting things for motorcycles, and look forward in the future for stuff, battle cards on motorcycles, because I know they haven't gotten a lot of love so far. Papa Wheelie is definitely not something you usually want to play in a motorcycles list. Neither is Bike Gang, honestly, all things considered. So hopefully y'all look forward to that. And then the last thing I got to reveal there is a Megatron Living Weapon stratagem. Your Megatron Living Weapon has +1 health, so that puts him at 15, +1 defense in alt mode to give him 3, which is what he should have had to begin with, and +1 attack in bot mode to give him 8, which again, I believe he is one of the strongest Transformers ever to live, so he should have a ridiculously high attack stat. But if your starting team was only Decepticons, this costs 1 star less, making it basically free, giving Megatron those stats that he should have had. And this also sort of encourages the people to play mono faction teams, So hopefully people are somewhat happy with that, because I know a lot of people aren't a big fan that you can play certain characters like Galvatron with non-Decepticons, because obviously he would never do that in the continuity of the show and stuff. So hopefully this leans a bit towards what people might like for this style of stuff. And the last character we're going to discuss today is actually a big one, which my friend Chris Fotheringham, I believe is how you pronounce it. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but he revealed Sky Lynx, which Sky Lynx is something that I've been doing relentless testing on for a ridiculously long time. I've been trying to make this guy not super unbalanced, but also not super weak. I've been trying to make him a foil to Sky Shadow, and it somewhat worked and it somewhat didn't. We'll kind of talk about that here in a second, but let's go ahead and talk about the Autobot shuttle half of him, because he is a combiner. He's a spaceship melee, and he's a 5'11", 0, 7 stars, with bold 1, tough 1. So that bold 1, tough 1 built in is really strong, and if I hadn't given him 0 defense, it might be too strong outside of just Sky Lynx decks, so we had to try and balance it out that way. And then the Sky Lynx shuttle transport, I actually didn't give it any traits whatsoever. I was thinking maybe a truck, but then imagining it in a truck deck, like a small truck deck, giving 4-wheel drive to something with Pierce 4 seems a little bit strong. So I just opted to not give it any traits at all, because technically it isn't really going to be doing all that much, all things considered, as it is just a transport shuttle. And please, I know that's probably not even what it is. It's just the best way I could do this combiner form. And I think it looks fine. I think that it's totally believable as a shuttle transport. And, you know, I'm not big on the lore entirely, but that's just what it's going to be. And no one can change my mind. But it's going to be a 2-10-3, so it's got a big defense, low attack, and then a Pierce 4. Obviously, the attack is lower than the Pierce, so you'll have to flip some oranges if you want to even get it to that point. And the HP is a little bit less than the other side, just because this is, I'd argue, the stronger one of the two. So I'm going to make it easier to kill if your opponent really has to. It is also 7 stars, so. And then the combined form of Sky Lynx is a melee ranged, so he does, you know, whatever stuff ranged and melee characters do. He's a 7-21-3, so he has the combined attack and defense of both the smaller characters and the health, so I wanted to make sure it wasn't too high and too low. The 3 defense is especially strong. If I had made it 2, he'd be too weak and I have to raise his health, but if I raise his health, then he'd become too strong regardless of his defense. And I do not want to create another Sky Shadow, mainly because this one obviously doesn't have a head. I had to make his HP just a tad higher than Sky Shadow. So he has Bold 1, Tough 1, and Pierce 4, which are obviously the 3 different components that were built into the smaller pieces. And whenever he combines, you do damage to an enemy Decepticon equal to the number of counters on your starboard entrance. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck is starboard entrance? That seems kind of random, but starboard entrance is actually his stratagem, so he has something similar to what Sky Shadow has, except it's not at all. It's actually based on a counter system instead of when your Sky Shadow piece is dying. So it says at the start of your turn, you get to put a counter on this with a maximum of 4. And then if it has at least 1 counter on it on your turn, you may combine Sky Lynx Autobot Shuttle and Sky Lynx Shuttle Transport into Sky Lynx Magnificent Warrior. So even if you just started the game, you could combine on turn 1 if you really want to, but you're only going to be pinging 1 damage, as well as also repairing 1, because then repair damage from Sky Lynx equal to the number of counters on this card. Then you have to flip it, but the counters stay on. So it's kind of good to hold off for as long as you can. So if you're not taking too much damage, then wait maybe 2 or 3 turns, or even the 4 if you can really help it. And, you know, build up those counters on Sky Lynx so you can ping 4 to an enemy, as well as also repair 4 from Sky Lynx. So it's got a pretty strong effect, and the counters also have a secondary effect for the upgrade that I made for Sky Lynx, which is Magnificence Beam. It's a orange-blue star card weapon, which I think the orange-blue, making it orange-blue obviously makes it to where Sky Lynx can be used both in orange and blue decks. So I'm not going to purely restrict it to one or the other, but it can only go on Sky Lynx, and obviously you have to make it a star card, otherwise the orange and blue becomes too powerful, especially if you're playing it in an either-or deck. The blue or the orange comes into effect regardless, because he has both bold and tough, but the upgraded character, being Sky Lynx, regardless of what form he's in, has +1 attack and Pierce 1 for each counter on starboard entrance against non-Autobots. So if he's attacking a non-Autobot and there are 4 counters on the starboard entrance stratagem, then he gets +4 attack and Pierce 4 against Decepticons and Mercenaries. So it's very, very strong if you can actually hold out that long. In my testing, I usually only wait 2 or 3 turns depending on who I'm facing. If it's a low damaging blue deck, then obviously you can wait the full 4. But if it's an aggro deck, you're usually going to be combining turn 1 or 2 depending on how much damage they are already on your Sky Lynx pieces. And now we're at the part where you guys get to vote for which character is going to be revealed next. It's going to be either Autobot Hardhead, Autobot Skids, and the last character you get to pick from is Autobot Nightbeat, which I think he's pretty interesting. They're all interesting, of course, but Autobot Nightbeat has some funny effects if you guys are interested in seeing that. But of course, those are the 3 characters you get to pick from. Make sure you vote in the comments below, as well as in the Facebook page. Once again, it is linked in the description below. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for all of your awesome support on WaveX. I am totally enjoying making these cards, and I really hope y'all are enjoying seeing the cards, playtesting the cards. I know some people like Michael Jundy are having a ton of fun just messing around with some of them. So yeah, don't forget to smash like and subscribe. You guys are awesome, and keep an eye out for the next video next week. Peace.